I remember the exact moment my life shattered into a million pieces. It was a stifling August afternoon, the kind where the air itself feels heavy and humid pressing down on you. I had just stepped off a red-eye flight from Seattle, bleary-eyed and aching but buzzing with the joy of a perfect vacation. My name is Sarah Miller, and I was 27 years old, full of optimism and a naive belief that my family, my own mother, truly loved me. That belief was about to be obliterated. I pushed through the automatic doors of the Charlotte Douglas International Airport, dragging my carry-on behind me, eager for the familiar embrace of home. My mom, Eleanor, was supposed to be waiting at the arrivals gate, her usual beaming smile ready to greet me. Instead, what I saw froze me in my tracks. Right there, in the bustling chaos of the terminal, surrounded by hurried travelers and their luggage, were 3 enormous black trash bags. They weren't neatly tied, but bursting at the seams, contents spilling out onto the polished airport floor. A flash of familiar blue denim, a corner of my favorite college sweatshirt, a glimpse of my worn leather boots. My stomach clenched. A cold dread, sharp and sudden, pierced through the exhaustion. And then I saw her. My mother, Eleanor, stood a few feet away from the overflowing bags, her arms crossed, a chillingly flat expression on her face. Her eyes, usually warm and expressive, were like chips of ice, devoid of any recognition, any affection. It was a look I'd never seen directed at me before, a look of pure, unadulterated contempt. What is this? I managed to stammer, my voice barely a whisper, the words catching in my throat. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. This couldn't be real. This was a nightmare, a cruel, elaborate prank. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She simply stared, her gaze unwavering, making me feel like an insect under a microscope. The airport noise, the announcements, the chatter of people, all faded into a muffled hum. All I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart. Then, in a voice as cold and flat as her expression, she delivered the words that would forever echo in my memory, words that would ignite a firestorm of resentment within me. "That's your stuff, Sarah. Get it out of my sight. You're not welcome back." Not welcome back? My own mother, telling me I was no longer welcome in the home I'd grown up in, the only home I'd ever known, the home I'd just spent a week dreaming of returning to? The betrayal hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just the words, it was the utter lack of emotion, the clinical precision of her delivery. It was as if she were talking about a stranger, not her own daughter. I looked from her icy face to the overflowing trash bags, then back to her. My mind reeled, trying to process this impossible reality. What had happened? What could possibly have led to this? My vacation had been peaceful, joyous. There had been no arguments, no warning signs, not a single hint of this impending catastrophe. 1 week earlier, we'd had a perfectly normal, loving goodbye. The humiliation was searing. Strangers were glancing, whispering, their eyes lingering on the bizarre scene. A young woman, fresh off a plane, staring at her life's possessions crammed into garbage bags, while her mother stood by cold as stone. My face burned, my eyes welled up, but I refused to let the tears fall. Not here, not now, not in front of her. A desperate, primal need for answers clawed at me. What unspeakable thing could I have done, unknowingly, to provoke such a brutal public expulsion? Every fiber of my being screamed for an explanation, for a reason, for anything that could make sense of this sudden, agonizing rejection. This wasn't just about a place to live. It was about the shattering of a fundamental trust, the tearing apart of the very fabric of my family. This wasn't just a bad day. This was the day my life irrevocably changed. This was the day resentment took root, a bitter seed planted deep within my soul. And what I discovered in the weeks and months that followed, what I uncovered about my mother's true motives and the dark secrets she'd been hiding, would transform that resentment into an obsession, a burning desire for justice that would consume me entirely. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, the gut-wrenching shock of someone you loved turning their back on you, then you know this feeling. You know that gnawing need to understand, to confront, to somehow, someday, make things right. My story is about that journey. It's about how a daughter, cast out and humiliated, fought to reclaim not just her belongings, but her dignity, her truth, and ultimately, her very identity. What I'm about to share with you will reveal the shocking lengths people will go to for money, for control, and for a twisted sense of revenge. And you'll witness the incredible, unforeseen consequences of one mother's calculated cruelty. Stick around, because the truth, when it finally emerged, was far more shocking than those garbage bags could ever have hinted at. The stale air of the airplane cabin clung to me, a heavy blanket of exhaustion after 20 hours of travel. My eyes burned, gritty from lack of sleep, but a flutter of anticipation danced in my chest. I was finally coming home. 2 months felt like an eternity, a lifetime spent navigating bustling European cities and quiet, ancient towns, all while a tiny part of me yearned for the familiar comfort of my own bed, my own space. I pictured my apartment, a cozy sanctuary filled with books and plants, a place where every item held a memory. I envisioned the worn armchair by the window, the way the morning light streamed across the living room floor, the quiet hum of my old refrigerator. It was more than just an apartment. It was a testament to years of hard work, saving every penny, building a life entirely on my own terms. My name is Alara, and that apartment was my anchor, my independence. Stepping off the plane at LAX felt like entering a different dimension. The dry, warm California air, the distinct scent of exhaust and blooming jasmine, the cacophony of 1,000 conversations blending into one overwhelming hum, it was all so uniquely Los Angeles. I navigated the familiar maze of terminals, my small carry-on bag feeling lighter with every step closer to the exit. I had called my mom from Paris, letting her know my flight details, expecting her usual effusive welcome, maybe even a surprise dinner reservation at my favorite Italian place. She had been unusually quiet on the phone, a clipped, almost distant tone in her voice that I'd brushed off as tiredness. Now, a prickle of unease started to form, a tiny, cold knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with jet lag. I pushed through the automatic doors, scanning the sea of faces for my mother. She was there, standing by the curb, but something was off. Her usual vibrant energy was muted, her shoulders hunched. She clutched a large industrial-sized black trash bag, and another. And then I saw them, a whole row of them, lined up neatly behind her, like morbid, oversized sentinels. My heart hammered against my ribs. What was going on? This wasn't right. My eyes darted from her pale, drawn face to the ominous black bags. Each one was cinched tightly at the top, bulging with an unidentifiable mass. A cold dread seeped into my bones, a premonition of something terrible. "Mom?" My voice came out as a strained whisper, barely audible above the airport din. She turned, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Shame? Regret? Crossing her face before it settled into a mask of forced neutrality. She didn't embrace me, didn't offer a hug, just gestured vaguely towards the bags with a trembling hand. "Alara," she said, her voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "We need to talk." My gaze dropped to the bags again, a sickening realization dawning on me. They weren't just random trash. The shape of a lampshade, the familiar pattern of a blanket, the distinct outline of my vintage record player. It was all there, crammed haphazardly into those unforgiving black plastic sacks. My belongings, my entire life, reduced to garbage. A wave of nausea washed over me, hot and sudden. My carefully constructed world felt like it was crumbling piece by piece, right there on the airport curb. "What is this?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice laced with a raw disbelief that bordered on hysteria. I pointed a trembling finger at the closest bag, recognizing the unmistakable outline of my grandmother's antique quilt, a family heirloom I cherished. My mother avoided my eyes, her gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder. Your stuff, Alara. Her words were clipped, almost offensive. It's all of it. From the apartment. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. The apartment. My sanctuary. The place I had worked tirelessly to create. What do you mean, from the apartment? I demanded, my voice rising, attracting the attention of a passing family. Where's my apartment, Mom? What happened? A profound silence stretched between us, broken only by the distant roar of a departing jet. My mother finally met my gaze, her eyes brimming with a pain that mirrored my own, but also a strange, unyielding resolve. Alara, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Your father. He sold it. The world tilted on its axis. Sold it? My apartment? The one I owned, the one I had paid for with my own money? The one that was legally mine? This wasn't just a betrayal, it was an annihilation. The resentment, a slow burn that had always simmered beneath the surface of my relationship with my father, suddenly erupted into a raging inferno. This wasn't just about property, it was about control. About a lifetime of him undermining my independence, always trying to dictate my choices. But this was a new low, a complete erasure of my existence, done while I was thousands of miles away, completely oblivious, my hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. The exhaustion of travel vanished, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. My home, my refuge, my entire life, reduced to a pile of garbage bags on the side of a busy airport road. And the architect of this destruction was my own father. The architect of this destruction was my own father, a man I had always believed to be a quiet, unassuming presence, the steady counterpoint to my mother's more volatile nature. Now, standing there, the harsh fluorescent lights of the airport illuminating the grotesque tableau of my life in trash bags, I felt a cold, hard rage begin to calcify inside me. This wasn't just an act of eviction. This was an annihilation, a deliberate erasure of my existence, done while I was thousands of miles away, completely oblivious. My hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms. The exhaustion of travel vanished, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. My home, my refuge, my entire life, reduced to a pile of garbage bags on the side of a busy airport road. My mother, she, finally spoke, her voice a thin, reedy whisper that barely carried over the airport din. He said you weren't paying rent, Alara. He said you abandoned the apartment. Her eyes, usually so bright and full of life, were downcast, darting nervously between me and the bags. A wave of nausea washed over me. Not paying rent? Abandoned the apartment? The words felt like a physical blow. I had meticulously set up automatic payments before I left, ensuring every bill, every rent payment, was taken care of. I had even sent my father a detailed spreadsheet with all the confirmation numbers. This was a lie, a blatant, calculated fabrication designed to justify this monstrous act. That's a lie, Mom, I said, my voice dangerously low, each word laced with venom. Every payment was made. I have the records. He knows I have the records. She flinched, as if my words were physical projectiles. Her silence was deafening, a tacit admission of complicity, or at least of her powerlessness in the face of his malice. This wasn't the first time my father's controlling tendencies had manifested, but never, not once, had it escalated to this level of cruelty. He had always been the one to manage things, to take care of the finances, even when it came to my own apartment. A constant, subtle encroachment on my independence that I had tolerated, foolishly, out of a misguided sense of filial duty. A car horn blared, jarring me back to the humiliating reality. People were staring, their curious gazes lingering on the bizarre scene. A young woman, fresh off a plane, confronting her mother amidst a sea of black trash bags. The shame was a searing brand, but it was quickly overshadowed by a growing, potent resentment. This wasn't just about the apartment anymore. This was about a lifetime of subtle manipulations, of being undermined, of having my autonomy chipped away at by the very person who should have championed it. I knelt, tearing open one of the bags with trembling hands. Inside, a jumbled mess of my most personal belongings. Clothes, books, a framed photograph of my grandmother, all tossed together like refuse. My heart sank further. He hadn't even bothered to pack them with any care, simply scooped them up and dumped them. The casual disregard was almost worse than the act itself. This wasn't just about money or property, it was about power, about asserting control, about making me feel small and insignificant. My mother, she, reached out, her hand hovering uncertainly. "Alara, please. Let's just get you home. We can figure this out." Her voice was laced with a desperate plea, a familiar tone I had heard countless times when she sought to appease him, to smooth over his rough edges. But there was no smoothing this over. This was a chasm, a gaping wound that had just been torn open. "Home?" I scoffed, standing up abruptly, the open trash bag spilling its contents onto the asphalt. "Where is home, Mom?" Because it's clearly not where I thought it was. The words hung in the air, thick with accusation. My mother visibly recoiled, her face paling. The betrayal, the deep, insidious feeling of being utterly abandoned by the two people who were supposed to be my anchors, was overwhelming. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and saw not just a mother, but a woman trapped, complicit in her own subjugation, and now, in mine. The resentment I felt towards my father began to seep into the cracks of my relationship with her. She had known. She had to have known. Why hadn't she warned me? Why hadn't she fought for me? "He said he needed the space for his new office," she stammered, finally offering a sliver of explanation, though it only deepened my outrage. "He's expanding his consulting business. He said it was urgent. An office? My apartment, my sanctuary, reduced to a convenient annex for his ever-expanding ego." The audacity was breathtaking. A cold resolve settled over me. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a declaration of war. My father had chosen to make my life a battlefield, and I would not cower. He had underestimated me, underestimated the depth of my resilience, the ferocity of my independence. He thought he could break me, make me dependent on him, force me back into the mold he had always envisioned for me. He was wrong. "Get in the car, Alara," my mother pleaded, her voice cracking. "We can talk about this at home." The irony of her words was not lost on me. Home. The place that no longer existed for me, at least not in the way I had known it. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was far from over. My father had made his move. Now it was my turn. The rising tide of betrayal was quickly turning into an obsession. I would not let this stand. I would not be erased. The ride from the airport was a blur of silent fury. My mother, usually so talkative, kept her eyes fixed on the road, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't remorse, not exactly. More like a strange mix of defiance and pity. I said nothing. The words lodged in my throat, choked by the sheer audacity of what had transpired. Every mile brought me closer to the apartment, the place I had poured my life into, the sanctuary that now felt like a battleground. I clutched my passport, my phone, and the single change of clothes I'd managed to salvage from the trash bags. This was all I had left of my physical world, a stark contrast to the emotional wreckage that now defined my existence. We pulled up to the curb, and the sight of my building, once a symbol of independence, now felt like a monument to betrayal. My mother turned off the engine, plunging us into an uncomfortable silence. "Alara," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper, "your father, he's been under a lot of stress." The flimsy excuse hung in the air, an insult to my intelligence. Stress? Was that what they called systematically dismantling their daughter's life? My gaze remained fixed on the building, refusing to meet hers. "He thinks you spend too much time on your own. He wants you to be closer to family." The words were a twisted parody of concern, a thinly veiled attempt to justify an act of pure malice. I felt the familiar burn behind my eyes, but I wouldn't cry. Not now. Not ever again for them. Closer to family? I finally spoke, my voice a low, dangerous growl. You call this closer to family? Throwing my life out onto the street, erasing me? My mother flinched, her composure cracking. It wasn't meant to be like this, Alara. He got carried away. Carried away. The casualness of her explanation ignited a fresh wave of resentment. This wasn't some impulsive outburst. This was calculated, deliberate. I thought of the years I had spent trying to please them, trying to earn their approval, only to have it all invalidated in a single cruel act. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had been living under an illusion. Their love, their support, had always been conditional, tied to their control. I opened the car door, the sound a definitive click in the oppressive silence. Don't bother, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. There's nothing left for me in there. I walked away, leaving her in the idling car, the image of her hunched figure in my rearview mirror, a chilling reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. My first stop was a cheap motel, the kind with flickering neon signs and the faint smell of stale cigarettes. I needed a place to think, to plan. Sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying every interaction, every subtle hint I had missed. My father's increasingly frequent calls, always asking about my finances, my plans, my independence, my mother's vague warnings about being careful. It all clicked into place, a horrifying mosaic of manipulation. The next morning I was at the bank before it even opened. My savings account, painstakingly built over years of working 2 jobs, was almost entirely depleted. Not by me. My father, it turned out, had slowly siphoned off my funds, using a power of attorney I had foolishly granted him years ago for a minor medical emergency. He had promised to only use it if I was incapacitated, a promise now revealed as a blatant lie. The betrayal cut deeper than the loss of my belongings. This was an assault on my future, a deliberate attempt to cripple me financially and force me back under their thumb. The bank manager, a kind woman named Sarah, looked at me with genuine pity as she explained the legal loopholes he had exploited. There was little she could do. I walked out of the bank feeling hollowed out, but a new emotion began to simmer beneath the surface: obsession. My father had taken everything, but he had also given me something invaluable: clarity. I saw him for what he truly was, not a protective parent, but a controlling manipulator who viewed my independence as a threat. And my mother? Her complicity, her silent agreement, was a wound that might never heal. This wasn't just about getting my stuff back. It was about reclaiming my life, my autonomy, my very identity. I would not be a pawn in their twisted game. I would not be erased. The resentment had hardened into a cold, unwavering resolve. This was no longer just a reaction. It was a mission. And I knew exactly where to start. The first call I made was to my attorney, M. Ark. He was a bulldog in a suit, known for his relentless pursuit of justice, and more importantly, he was a family friend who knew the intricate, often messy dynamics of my mother's side of the family. His voice, usually calm and measured, held a note of genuine shock as I recounted the scene at LAX. I didn't hold back, detailing the garbage bags, the chilling silence, and the profound sense of betrayal. He listened patiently, interjecting only with sharp, incisive questions that cut straight to the core of the legal implications. This isn't just about property, Alara, he stated, his voice now firm. This is about a clear violation of your tenancy rights, and potentially emotional distress. We have a strong case. His words, strong case, echoed in my mind, a small flicker of warmth in the icy grip of my anger. It wasn't about the monetary value of the items in those trash bags, though many were irreplaceable. It was about the principle, the blatant disrespect, the outright declaration that my life, my independence, meant nothing. I spent the next few days in a whirlwind of legal consultations, gathering every piece of documentation I could find. My lease agreement, utility bills, even old photos of my apartment to establish proof of residence and ownership of the items. Each document I unearthed, each memory it triggered, fueled the fire within me. My mother's casual cruelty, her willingness to discard me and my belongings as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience, solidified my resolve. The next step was confronting them directly, but not in a way they expected. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I crafted a carefully worded letter, under Mark's guidance, outlining the legal ramifications of their actions. It was cold, precise, and devoid of any emotional appeal. I listed every item I could remember, from my grandmother's antique locket to the custom-made bookshelf my father had built for me. I demanded an immediate explanation and a plan for restitution. The letter was sent via certified mail, a formal declaration of war, delivered right to their doorstep. Their response was exactly what I anticipated. A flurry of indignant phone calls and texts. Not from my mother, but from my aunt and uncle, who had always been her loyal enforcers. They accused me of being ungrateful, of exaggerating, of trying to ruin my mother's reputation. She was just trying to help you, Alara. My aunt shrieked over the phone, her voice dripping with false concern. You were gone for so long, she thought you'd abandoned the place. Their words were like oil on a fire, intensifying my fury. Abandoned? After I had explicitly told her my return date? The audacity of their gaslighting was almost comical, if it weren't so deeply hurtful. I ignored their calls, letting them go straight to voicemail. Their desperate attempts to manipulate me only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about the physical possessions. It was about the emotional boundaries they had so carelessly trampled. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my identity, from their suffocating control. My mother, the queen of passive aggression, remained silent, a silence that spoke volumes. It was her usual tactic, let others do her dirty work, then feign innocence. But this time, her silence wouldn't protect her. Mark advised against direct contact for now, letting the legal process unfold. But I knew I couldn't wait for a court date to confront the source of my pain. I needed to see her face, to make her acknowledge the damage she had inflicted. The thought gnawed at me, a constant hum beneath the surface of my daily life. I needed to understand why. Why would a mother do this to her own child? The answer, I suspected, lay buried deep within the twisted roots of our family history, a history I was finally ready to unearth. The day the certified letter was delivered, I drove to their house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want to give them time to prepare, to concoct another elaborate lie. The air was thick with unspoken tension as I pulled up to the familiar curb. The house, once a symbol of warmth and family gatherings, now loomed like a fortress, its windows reflecting the harsh afternoon sun. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the street. I took a deep breath, the taste of resolve bitter on my tongue. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The air was thick with unspoken tension as I pulled up to the familiar curb. The house, once a symbol of warmth and family gatherings, now loomed like a fortress, its windows reflecting the harsh afternoon sun. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the street. I took a deep breath, the taste of resolve bitter on my tongue. This was it. The moment of reckoning. I pushed open the heavy front door, the familiar creak echoing through the entryway. Every piece of furniture, every framed photograph, every scent in that house was a memory, a betrayal. She stood in the living room, silhouetted against the large bay window, her back to me. The very sight of her, the woman who had once been my anchor, now ignited a cold fury within me. My voice, when it came, was steady, devoid of the tremor I felt deep inside. We need to talk. She turned slowly, her eyes, usually so expressive, now flat and unreadable. There was no surprise on her face, no feigned innocence, just a quiet, almost unsettling resignation. I knew you'd come, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I knew you'd find out. Find out what exactly? I asked, stepping further into the room, my gaze sweeping over the familiar objects. That you threw away my entire life? That you decided my independence was an inconvenience? That you sold my apartment out from under me, without a word? The questions tumbled out, each one sharper than the last, fueled by months of simmering resentment. My hands clenched into fists, the urge to lash out almost overwhelming. She finally met my gaze, a flicker of something unidentifiable in her eyes. Not regret, not apology, but something akin to a desperate weariness. It wasn't like that, she. Not? Entirely. Then how was it? I demanded, my voice rising, the carefully constructed calm beginning to crack. How do you explain garbage bags filled with my belongings? How do you explain a for sale sign on a place I poured my heart and soul into? How do you explain the absolute crushing betrayal of finding out my own mother, the person I trusted most, systematically dismantled my life while I was halfway across the world? Her shoulders slumped. I needed the money, she. Things got bad, worse than I let on. Bad? What could be so bad that you destroy your own daughter's life? I paced, the anger a living thing inside me. I would have helped you. You could have told me. I sent you money, remember? Every month, without fail. Even when I was struggling myself because I thought you needed it, because I thought you loved me. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Love? You think this is about love? This is about survival. Your father? He left me with nothing. Nothing but debts and a house that was falling apart. I couldn't keep up. My father died 10 years ago, I retorted, my voice incredulous. You've had 10 years to figure things out. And even if that were true, even if you were drowning, how does that justify selling my home? How does that justify throwing my memories, my irreplaceable possessions, into the trash? Did you even consider me for 1 second? She finally looked directly at me, her eyes clouded with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. I was desperate, she. I saw an opportunity, a quick sale. Your apartment was a good investment, in a desirable area. It was the only way I could see out. An opportunity? I echoed, the word tasting like ash. You saw my life, my stability, my future as an opportunity for your own escape? Did you ever stop to think about the consequences for me? Did you consider that I had nowhere to go? That you were making me homeless? Her voice hardened, a defensive edge creeping in. You always had me, she. You always had a place here. She gestured vaguely around the living room. This is your home. This is your home, I corrected, my voice laced with ice. Not mine, not anymore. Not after what you've done. You talk about survival, but what about mine? You talk about desperation, but what about the desperation you forced upon me? I worked for everything I had, every single thing, and you just erased it. A long silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations and years of unspoken truths. The air crackled with the raw emotion that had been simmering beneath the surface for far too long. This wasn't just about the apartment anymore. This was about a lifetime of subtle manipulations, of her needs always overshadowing mine, of a mother who saw her daughter not as an individual, but as an extension, a resource. The betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. It was a wound that had been festering, and now, finally, it was open. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. My mother's eyes, usually so quick to well with performative tears, were dry, hard, and utterly devoid of remorse. This wasn't the woman who had once cradled me, sung lullabies, or patched up scraped knees. This was a stranger, a cold, calculating architect of my pain, finally unmasked. I looked at she, truly looked at her, and saw not a mother, but a master manipulator. Her entire life, a carefully constructed facade designed to extract maximum emotional and financial yield from everyone around her. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the wind from my lungs. The wound was open, yes, but now it was cauterized by the searing heat of absolute clarity. You don't get it, do you? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, devoid of the tremor I expected. This isn't about the apartment. This isn't about your convenience or your perceived sacrifices. This is about everything. Every time you minimized my achievements, every time you made my successes about you, every time you used guilt as a weapon. I took a step closer, my gaze unwavering. This is about the years I spent believing I was never enough, because you needed me to be dependent, to be small, so you could feel big. Her jaw tightened, a flicker of something, perhaps fear, maybe just annoyance, crossing her face. Don't be so dramatic, Alara. You're overreacting. I just needed some space, and you were gone for months. It was practical. Her voice, though, lacked its usual conviction, a subtle crack beneath the surface. It was the first time I had ever heard her sound truly uncertain, truly on the defensive, without a ready excuse or a tearful. Performance. Practical? A bitter laugh escaped me. You threw away my life, my memories, my sense of security. You didn't just clear out an apartment, you tried to erase me. You tried to erase the person I've fought so hard to become. Independent of you. The years of suppressed anger, the quiet resentment that had simmered beneath the surface, now erupted like a volcano. It wasn't a scream but a low, dangerous growl. But you failed. Because I am still here. And I remember everything. I pulled out my phone, my fingers steady despite the turmoil within me. Remember how you always told me I was too emotional, too sensitive, that I needed to toughen up? I navigated to an app, my thumb hovering over a button. You taught me well, Mom. I learned to be practical just like you. I pressed send. The screen flashed a confirmation. That was a transfer. Every single penny I've ever given you, every loan that was never repaid, every gift that came with strings attached, every dime I poured into your endless emergencies. It's all gone. Transferred from your account to mine. With interest. Her eyes widened, a genuine shock spreading across her face. What are you talking about? You can't do that. That's illegal. Is it? I raised an eyebrow. Or is it just practical? You taught me about power, about leverage. You taught me that money buys freedom. And I learned. I've been tracking it meticulously for years. Every transaction, every favor, every time you exploited my generosity. My lawyer says, it's a clear case of financial elder abuse, except I'm not the elder. It's all documented. Every single time you manipulated me into giving you money under false pretenses, the house you mortgaged without telling me, the debts you incurred in my name, the investments that vanished. It's all there. Her face drained of color, the color of true fear, not the feigned vulnerability she usually displayed. You wouldn't, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother the moment you decided my life was disposable, the moment you saw me as nothing more than a resource to be drained, I retorted, my voice sharp, cutting through the last vestiges of her carefully constructed illusion. I've spent a lifetime trying to earn your love, your approval. I've bent over backward, sacrificed my own happiness, always putting your needs first. And for what? To come home to find my life in garbage bags at the curb? The air crackled with the weight of our unspoken history, the years of unspoken resentments, the decades of her subtle, insidious control. This isn't about revenge, I continued, my voice softening, but with an underlying steel. This is about justice. This is about taking back what's mine. My financial independence, yes, but more importantly, my emotional freedom. You no longer have a hold on me. Not anymore. I walked past her, towards the waiting Uber, the black trash bags now looking utterly insignificant. The apartment, the belongings, they were just things. What truly mattered was the clarity, the unshakable sense of self I had finally reclaimed. The cost had been immense, a lifetime of emotional wounds, but the freedom was priceless. I got into the car, not looking back. The driver pulled away, and through the tinted window, I saw she standing there, a solitary, defeated figure amidst the discarded remnants of my past. The wound was finally healing, leaving behind a scar, a powerful reminder of a battle won, a life reclaimed. It was bittersweet, this closure, but it was mine. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. heavy with the weight of unspoken accusations and years of bitter history. My mother, seated at the defense table, looked smaller than I remembered, her usual imperious posture replaced by a slumped weariness. Across the aisle I sat, every nerve ending buzzing, a strange mix of anticipation and dread swirling within me. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was the final brutal chapter of a war that had raged since I was a child, culminating in the day I found my life in garbage bags. The judge's voice cut through the stillness, a crisp, dispassionate sound. Miss Evelyn Reed, the court has reviewed the evidence presented regarding the unlawful eviction and destruction of property. Given the overwhelming documentation, including financial records, property damage assessments, and witness testimonies, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was happening. After years of feeling like a ghost in my own life, dismissed and discarded, the truth was finally being acknowledged. The judge continued, detailing the restitution my mother was ordered to pay, not just for the lost belongings, but for the emotional distress, the forced relocation, the sheer, unadulterated chaos she had unleashed. My mother's face, usually a mask of unshakable control, crumpled. A low, guttural sound escaped her lips, a sound I'd never heard from her before. It wasn't anger. It was a raw, wounded cry. For a split second, a flicker of something akin to pity stirred within me. This was the woman who had brought me into the world, who had once read me bedtime stories. But that fleeting emotion was quickly eclipsed by the memory of those garbage bags, the cold indifference in her eyes, the way she had casually tossed my entire existence aside. As the proceedings concluded, I stood, my legs feeling strangely light. My lawyer, a kind, steady woman named Sarah, put a reassuring hand on my arm. "It's over, Evelyn," she murmured. "You won." But winning felt hollow. I looked at my mother again, her face buried in her hands. The victory I had so desperately craved, the justice I had obsessed over, didn't bring the surge of elation I had imagined. Instead, there was a profound sense of exhaustion, a quiet emptiness where the rage used to be. The betrayal had cut so deep, the resentment had festered for so long, that even its resolution left a scar. Walking out of the courthouse, the afternoon sun felt strangely bright. The world hadn't stopped, even though mine had been turned upside down so many times. I saw a young couple laughing, a child chasing pigeons. Life in its messy, beautiful way was continuing. Later that week, the first payment arrived, a cashier's check, impersonal and stark. It was a substantial sum, enough to rebuild, to finally buy a place of my own, to truly start fresh without the shadow of debt and displacement hanging over me. I deposited it, watching the numbers appear on the screen, a tangible representation of a painful past. I used some of the money to buy a small house, a bungalow with a porch and a tiny patch of garden. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Every decision, from the paint color to the furniture, was a deliberate act of reclamation. I wasn't just decorating a house. I was rebuilding a home, a sanctuary, brick by painstaking brick, from the ashes of what had been destroyed. One evening, as I sat on my new porch sipping iced tea, I realized something profound. The closure wasn't just about the money or the legal victory. It was about severing the last cord that tethered me to a toxic past. My mother's actions, as devastating as they were, had forced me to confront my own resilience. I had been pushed to the brink, forced to fight for my dignity, and in doing so, I had discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. The bitterness hadn't vanished entirely, not yet. Some wounds heal slowly, leaving faint silvery lines, but the burning obsession for revenge had cooled into a quiet understanding. My mother had made her choices, and I had made mine. Her actions had created an unexpected path for me, a path that, while painful, had led to independence and a profound sense of self-reliance. The cost had been immense, but the lessons learned, the strength forged in the fire of betrayal, felt like a bittersweet, hard-won prize. I was finally free.